Welcome to another episode of Where the Stones Have a Story to Tell. We are midway through our series on attempting to recreate what could have been an ancient native ceremony or ritual here at Gilbert Hills State Forest in Foxboro, Massachusetts. To catch you up, underlying all of it is that ancient natives felt that they were part of the cosmos or spiritualism, not necessarily worshippers of it. Their role in that relationship was really about maintaining and helping balance. So they created that balance or attempted to create that balance through rituals they performed. One of the rituals that are well known, and I'm relying a great deal on these episodes and research that Mary Gage has done in New Hampshire and Connecticut, just north and south of here. One of the rituals that was performed each year, in all likelihood, was a sun ritual where the balance was maintained by helping the sun get to the underworld going into the winter. It's dark out, you don't have much sunlight, and that was their way of making that happen and creating that balance. So when they performed these rituals, they had essentially four groups of spirits. The fourth group we'll hit in the next episode, but the first would be helper or enabler spirits. And along the way, and given the research, we think we've been able to find where they would have brought in water spirits, serpent spirit, which also implies an underworld ceremony, and then potentially a moon spirit. We've gotten here where the host of the sun spirit would be the underworld spirit for the winter, may have been summoned from this cave. We're going to now travel along, noticing the cavern here as well. And I'm keeping the camera going as I talk, in part to show you what this looks like up above me here. And in the research, it indicated that ceremonies involving caves very often had overlooks, and participants of the ceremony may have stood on top of the overlook looking down upon the cave. So we certainly have a structure here that would be consistent with that. We're heading up to the next object that I think is part of this ceremony, in that while we've accounted for the helper spirits, we've accounted for the underworld or host spirit, we have not accounted for the guest spirit, in this case, the sun spirit. And we're going to go up to a spot where I think that might have occurred. Not only would that have been a key part of the ceremony, it is going to tell us, in all likelihood, what day of the year the ceremony occurred here. And so, in our prior episodes, we went through the entire structure here and came across this spot here. While this stone here would be considered a niche where offerings would have been placed, we may have a cairn or split boulder cairn here. A commenter on a viewer on the prior episodes relating to this asked me to sweep away the leaves to make it more apparent, and I've done that. So you can see that cairn not only carrying all the way through, but stones down inside. That's a pretty standard structural combination. Right behind me down the hill is the 200-foot snake effigy. So why I think this is related is, one, the angle this row makes is going to take us to what would have been the location of the main ceremony, which we'll hit in the next episode. However, and we're going to rely on the Sunseeker app to tell us what day of the year this may have been used. Particularly the serpent spirit implies an underworld ritual. So in the spring or summer, depending on the era, the ritual would have been to bring the sun out of the underworld. A totally different ritual here. This one with the serpent is likely the underworld. The day of the year, I will show you is likely December 21st, the winter solstice. And so, taking a look at the line this makes, and in fact, hopefully you can see this. This is set, this is the Sunseeker app, used this a bunch of times. This is set on December 21st. That is the winter solstice, and you can see sunset is exactly in line with this row. The sun ceremony happened here, and there is an additional fact that I hadn't picked up until I was prepping for this particular episode, even though I've been up here dozens of times doing the research. But if this line that we just looked at points to sunset, sunrise would have happened directly on the line through the snake effigy that we covered in the last ceremony and its midpoint where there is a decided gap. So while I had postulated in the prior episode that may have been a place for the moon ceremony, could have been otherwise, it could have been pointed directly towards sunrise on December 21st, thus accounting now for the guest spirit, the sun spirit. All right. I think that's an interesting way, as the modern Native Americans encourage people thinking about this, to let the landscape speak for itself. That certainly, in my mind, speaks for itself. Okay, so from here, we're going to follow the line that this cairn implies down the hill, and it takes us directly to several other objects that are along the way. So let's go check it out. So along the path that is implied by our last cairn and niche, traveling roughly 235 degrees, we come across a prayer seat. And I bring this up, one, because it's in direct line that we're traveling from the implied line of the cairn. Also, the prayer seat happens to be facing the same exact direction as well. Now, in the research from Mary Gage, there's no mention of prayer seat utilization that I can find. And so I stopped here for a couple of reasons. One, it's here, so we have to account for it, and talk about the surroundings in this forest have an inordinate number of prayer seats. I've counted well over 25. Given 1,200 acres, that's an unusually large number of prayer seats given what I've seen in the research of other sites. One of the things, so it may have been part of this ceremony. However, this also implies or brings in another part of Mary Gage's research, was a generational aspect over time of the utilization of ritual areas. So in both Stonehenge of America, New Hampshire, Gungy Wamp in Connecticut, there was evidence that the same location was used for ceremonies over courses of time, and the stone structures used in those ceremonies changed. So for instance, they may have been in the same place, potentially for the same ceremony, same part of the year, but for whatever reason, the utilization, the philosophy, the belief of the shaman at the time required a change. So what we may see here is something that was used at one point in the ceremony, but then may not have been used later on. I have mentioned before at this prayer seat, this looks much older than the rest of the structures here. It is a bit more broken down. The earth has grown up around it much more than the other structures have. And so given that this is probably much older than many of the other structures we're looking at, that would be my guess. But nonetheless, exactly facing where we were headed and that last cairn. So I think possibility exists that this is evidence of generational and abandoned earlier usage. Okay, off now to that 235 degree angle where we will come up to the labyrinth and a linear or connected cairn. Let's go. So not far from that prayer seat is the outcropping of rocks that, in my theory, holds the ending part of the ceremony. Behind me here is this row, this cliff, that leads up to the very last position, the overlook position that overlooks wetlands and back to the caves. Abutting that here is what I would argue the end of the linear cairn that reaches from the labyrinth, or put another way, the enclosure that I think was the main ceremony spot. And so as we see here, this cairn ends here and runs all the way up to the stone outcropping. Which is the site of the labyrinth or enclosure and main ceremony. This rock outcropping here. So wrapping up this portion of the episode, what have we seen so far? How does the theory played out? Well, we have an area that looks a lot like a basin and drain for a water ceremony. We've got a 200-foot snake effigy that, in my mind, is similar to the scenario on Gunjiwamp, where there was bird petroglyphs on the stone. The bird would be a spirit relating, in their minds, to the upper world. So you probably there are talking about a spring or summertime ritual, bringing the balance of the help of the sun back to the sky after the close of the winter. Here we've got a serpent effigy. From there, that tracks directly down to a cave, which I would argue would have been where they would have accounted for the underworld spirit, brought that into the ceremony. In this episode now heading up to the point along a ridge line where we've got a niche and a split boulder cairn. Happens to be along the line of sunset, pointed directly towards sunset, with an alignment potentially to sunrise of December 21st, which is the winter solstice. Carrying forth down from there, we've now collected the sun spirit, which would have been the guest spirit of the underworld spirit, which would have been the host spirit, to a prayer seat, which I argue is evidence of an abandoned ritual use, maybe millennia before much of what we're seeing here, up to the point where we've got a linear cairn and our main spirit spot, which is this labyrinth enclosure. I'll close by saying that some structures in the research have better known usage than others. Linear cairns are one of those that don't have very clear utilization. And I think in the next episode, we're going to find at least one specific use that can be attributed to linear cairns after this research. And it has to do with that fourth group of spirits that we'll discuss next time. So, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.